This week on the Game Adventure, NASA finally went back to the moon using some of the same tech that powered your GameCube. If 20-year-old chips can handle rocket science, why does my PC still struggle to run The Sims 3? We're getting into it on today's episode. Let's go. The Game Adventure Podcast is a weekly, family-friendly show keeping you up to date on all the latest news in video games. We'll also mix in a heavy dose of nostalgia with retro games and even things like how the worlds of tech and culture and even faith interact with video games as an art form. We're doing it all in less than an hour every Saturday morning, so let's get started. What is up, everybody? Hope you had a fantastic week this week. My week was a little bit up and a little bit of down. I finally got this new computer built, and by new, I mean I scavenged old parts on the internet and built this PC so that I could have a PC that actually ran some good PC games and, ran Minecraft for my son and a couple of other things to use it for. I haven't had an actual dedicated PC for playing games for quite a while. And this week it bit the dust after only a week of use. I traced it down through every component and ended up finding out it was actually the motherboard on this old Dell PC that I was trying to use to build the whole thing. So if all goes well, today sometime, a new motherboard and case should be showing up at my house, and we'll get it put back together, and my son can go back to playing Minecraft and be happy as a, well, you don't say happy as a clam in Minecraft, you'd say happy as a creeper, maybe? They seem pretty happy. I mean, they kind of have a smile on their face when they're chasing after you. But anyway, I digress. We have a lot of news to get through today. Lots has happened, as always, in the world of video games. And we want to get into it, and we don't want to waste any time talking about my computer woes. So let's get into it with the industry news. At the top of the list, Crimson Desert continues to keep up the momentum. Their open world action RPG has received a couple of patches, which I think are really cool, that they're still continuing to add things. They surpassed 5 million copies in under a month, and has even received some high praise not only from players, but from the Witcher 3 director, saying that this is actually a really fresh experience, and it takes some kind of risky design swings instead of copying other standard AAA formulas. So that's fantastic. I love to see that they took a risk and they're continuing to work on it and add these kind of post-launch support, game-changing patches that have really shifted reviews. They are listening to the players. Reviews initially were mixed and now are moving to very positive, actually. So I think this is a very player-first approach. I think this is very different from, and it contrasts with what's happened with the game Samson that was released, that was supposed to be kind of a GTA-esque game, so not really my genre of games necessarily, but they essentially launched what critics are saying is a broken game. There are serious game-stopping issues, serious issues. For example, I heard one guy talk about how he was trying to do a standard collection quest where he had to collect these 5 packages, and he couldn't for the life of him find the 5th package, and so he looked into the code and found out there was no 5th package. I can't imagine anything that would make me more upset, quite honestly. I already hate collection quests, and if I found out that a piece of the quest was missing and it couldn't be completed, that would be it for me with that game. So I think that there's no excuse for releasing a game that is fundamentally that broken at the very outset. That is not player first, and we'll post some patches later. We didn't want to do the necessary work to finish this game to the proper standards, and we're just going to release it because we're hoping we can get the money and run. Hopefully that's not what they do. I hope they do take the time to actually fix the game, but I don't know, not looking good for Samson. Marathon is the other big game that's been doing really well. This is the Bungie extraction shooter that dropped a little while ago. They have added some additional stuff to it, but one of the fun things that I heard about was the community has been pitching ideas like trying to give players free weekly loadouts to help people who just want to play it casually actually survive in the more hardcore modes of the game. So I have said openly, this is not my style of game. I do not want to play a game in which when I die, I lose everything, because that feels like real life to me. And I don't play video games in order to experience more of the challenge of real life. I want a challenge that I can overcome and that I can enjoy and I can play for a little while and then walk away from and come back later. So I love the community-led ideas to make the game more accessible, even though some people are saying, yeah, that's going to make it too friendly to new players. I like it. I think it's great. It might not woo me to the game, but again, I am probably not the target audience for this game, for Marathon. Another group is actually looking at gamers in general, trying to get them to apply for jobs. And surprisingly, it's the FAA. They're trying to encourage gamers to apply for to apply for jobs with air traffic control. They're specifically targeting recruitment ads at gamers in their early 20s, using Xbox logos, gaming terminology. They're trying to essentially address this severe shortage of controllers by tapping into these demographics with already some hard skills like multitasking and spatial awareness. And man, if you're a gamer in that kind of target range that they're looking for, early 20s, the average salary is $155,000. So, I mean, shoot, maybe I should stop podcasting and go become an air traffic controller. I don't know. It seems like kind of a high stress environment. I don't know if that's really my jam. But basically, they've lost a ton of people, and the need is really, really high. So I think that's awesome. It's a great chance to make a really high-paying career opportunity for people who are interested in kind of a high-pressure, real-world environment like that. Next on the list is Roblox agrees to a $12 million settlement with the state of Nevada. So they settled with this lawsuit to avoid trial, which means they didn't want to go to trial, I'm assuming because they thought there was a high risk that they would lose. And so they paid a settlement of $12 million instead. The lawsuit was basically about the safety protocols that were built into the game to protect kids who are under 16 years old. They have kind of tried to change some of that safety protocols, including like a facial age estimation system that's linked to government IDs. They've changed things so that people who are under 16 on Roblox can only message adults if they're designated as a trusted friend via a QR code. So they're kind of trying to add in base parental controls. I think, honestly, that Roblox, if you're a parent, if you're an adult and you play Roblox, this is not for you. I'm talking to the parents. If you have kids, I would highly recommend that you not allow them to play Roblox. I know it's popular. I know that all of the other kids are doing it, supposedly. That's what kids are going to tell you. But here's the thing. The parental controls have always been so lax around this game that it is completely appropriate that the state of Nevada, of all states, is asking them to make serious changes because they have used deceptive marketing, trying to market this as a safe experience for minors. And historically, their moderation tools have been absolutely inadequate. There is so much danger on the wide open web for kids. And I would say Roblox is not all that much safer. So if you have kids, if you're a parent, please, please, please be careful about the access that you're giving them to a game like Roblox. It is not a natively safe place to have them be in the digital world. That's it for my naysaying on that. That's my piece. Another kind of interesting news piece is that the group Panic says that the Playdate catalog won't accept games that are made with generative AI. I think this is fantastic. So they've drawn a hard line for the upcoming Season 3 catalog, and they're saying that no games that have utilized generative AI, meaning like ChatGPT images, Midjourney, Suno for music, for art, audio, music, text, nothing, they're not going to accept them into the catalog. So they did kind of carve out a space and say you can use AI for code assistance, but it has to be publicly flagged so that buyers are aware that AI was used in the creation of that. I strongly support this decision to ban generative AI from the catalog. Sorry. I think the human crafted art being a part of video games as an art form is really, really important. So props to Panic for making that decision. And with that, let's move on to the tech bulletin. So in the world of tech, there's tons and tons of stuff going on. This week, I wanted to highlight one of the things happening in the retro space, retro technology. Anbernic, a company that I've talked about before, is creating a new Android-based retro gaming handheld with a 1x1 display, which is interesting in and of itself. There's not a ton of those 1x1 kind of like Game Boy size displays that swivels out to make it look almost like, if you remember the old T-Mobile Sidekick from the early 2000s, it features this like hinge that is kind of a mix between aluminum and ABS plastic. And then it has removable shoulder buttons that allows players to adjust the L2 and R2 height, so those two little shoulder triggers. And so they haven't released a release date for it yet. But I think this is kind of fun because this market of retro tech continues to expand as people realize, yeah, we actually do want to be able to play these old games. I think it's an interesting concept because it allows it to be much smaller in form. You can't actually shove it into a pocket. I have the AYN Thor, which I love, but it is a little bit big. Like, I mean, you could slide this thing into your pocket, but you'd have to have some like early 2000s cargo pants, which I may or may not have. But you have to have big pockets to be able to shove this thing in there. So I think having a cool, like small little device that really is smaller than a phone, just slides in a pocket, I think that's kind of fun, especially for retro handheld enthusiasts such as myself. Another piece of tech that is coming out that's also retro related is a console. So there's a new console. It is called the Neo Geo AES Plus. And basically, there is a company that is reproducing a one-to-one hardware replica of the 1990s Neo Geo AES console. It was a home console. So instead of using emulation, it is powered by basically re-engineering those chips to replicate the original silicon that was used. A few updates, thank goodness that they are including, are both HDMI and CRT outputs, and it plays both original and new cartridges. So I think this is just wild that in 2026, we are reproducing hardware from the 1990s, and it's a very cool thing because I think it highlights that we're not necessarily interested in the very newest, latest tech all the time. Not all the time. It doesn't always have to be on the bleeding edge. Sometimes we can actually go back and see what worked then and make it work just as well today. And it's still interesting. It's still beautiful. It's still fun. So with that, let's move on to the segment that I'm calling Dan's Point of View. I have quite literally had my eyes on the sky for the last, couple of months. I'm really kind of rediscovering this interest in astronomy. I love the stars, always have. I've got a new lens for my camera, so I'm taking like zoom pictures of the moon, and I've been really excited about the Artemis 2 mission. And I heard something pretty interesting about it this week that got me to thinking, which is the whole point of this little segment, is something that I got to thinking about that maybe you want to think about as well. So I found out that the Artemis 2 Orion spacecraft actually utilized the IBM PowerPC 750 processor. And it was basically a radiation-hardened version of the G3 chip that famously powered the Nintendo GameCube and the Wii. So that's right. The same type of chip that was used in the GameCube and the Wii played a part in the mission to send a spacecraft around the moon. So why utilize 2002 tech in 2026? I'm sure there are many reasons for this, and probably only a NASA scientist could explain exactly why they did this. But one of the reasons is that they prioritize proven reliability, because in deep space, having something that's cutting edge is often kind of synonymous with untested. Like, yeah, it's cutting edge, but we don't know how it behaves under stress after a certain period of time in outer space. You can't really be taking those kinds of risks with technology. Furthermore, the older, larger architecture of the PowerPC 750 is physically more resistant to radiation, bit flipping, compared to the really dense, smaller chips of today. And that's a big deal when you are outside of the atmosphere dealing with solar radiation in space. You don't want your chip to all of a sudden get fried because it's too thin and too new. And so they went with this older style chip. So here's my thought about this. If a chip from 2002 can manage, things like, life support for the lunar mission, it proves that hardware doesn't have to be new and powerful in its specific role to function well in that role. And I've been thinking about how modern games often demand these like massive specs in order to run because, for one reason, is that developers have no longer been forced to optimize their games. So, for example, I tried to load The Sims onto my computer a while ago. This is The Sims 3, and it is well known as a resource gobbler that remains really poorly optimized regardless of the available power. So, like, if the power is available, it's going to suck it up and use it. And if you think back to like when Crysis came out, that like Crysis was the kind of the bleeding edge. It needed the best type of computer. I remember when people were, buying computers and building computers, and the first question that you would ask is, does it run Crysis? Because we wanted to know, like, Crysis is a hard game to run. But the thing is that those high specs don't necessarily equate to more fun. So while Crysis may have been the bleeding edge of requirement, it didn't mean that it was more fun or more popular. And quite frankly, not a lot of people ended up really playing it as much as could have if it was more optimized for systems and ran better on the existing technology. So what I'm saying is the result of developers kind of having unlimited power with technology today is that they have abandoned, in a lot of cases, really efficient coding, which leads to these enormous size games with the latest tech, but yet still they suffer from frame rate stability and they still don't run as smoothly as they could. And so if you look into game development, I was watching a video of a guy talking about a couple weeks ago how game developers lie to you, and that's a really good thing. And I was intrigued by this idea because he said a lot of game development, when you're being really clever because you have constraints that you have to abide by, right? Like limitations of the technology at hand, the best way to do that is by tricking the player, by using illusions of complexity without like taxing the hardware to actually do it. So one example of this is called, I'll give you a couple of examples to kind of what I'm talking about here. Occlusion culling. And what occlusion culling does is, in the real world, we know that all of reality exists, whether we're looking at it or not. Like if you can hear my dog snoring in the background, I guess it's, it's early for him. It's fine. He still exists even though I'm not looking at him. But in a video game, they will basically set up the game so that it stops rendering anything that the player isn't currently looking at. Because that way you don't have to render a 360 world in detail. You only have to render the field of view that the player is actually looking at. And so if you get kind of the view of the camera outside of the player, it's weird because the world that you're looking at like disappears behind the player when the player turns around and looks a different direction. Another example of that is the transparent window puddle effect. And so one way that developers will create a like reflective puddle where you can kind of see the reflection of the world around in the puddle is by doing, really complex coding to actually make that reflection function. But one way that you can trick the eye is by basically flipping the whole world down 180 degrees below. So you have like an inverted version of the whole world that is below the rendered world that the player walks around in. And then you only, you cover that up with the ground, but you leave holes in it visually so that the player thinks they're seeing the reflection off the puddle, but the game doesn't have to render a reflection. It's just showing straight through to the inverted version of the world that exists below where the player is standing. So perfect reflections is what you get with nearly zero performance cost to set that up. So I think we are seeing a return to this kind of ingenuity, but I don't think it's happening in the AAA game space. I think it's happening in the indie space and in the retro space where hardware limits force creativity. And so I wonder if the future of bleeding edge gaming won't be necessarily about how much tech we can make use of to make this game function. And it might be more about ingenious software maneuvers that just delight players who are playing on any kind of hardware. In other words, how well can I get this to run with the lowest amount of requirements so people like Dan and his kids can play on that kind of middle of the road PC that he hacked together from eBay parts. So maybe that's the future. I hope so, because that gets me kind of excited about what might be possible. And with that, let's actually head to the Retro Rewind. There are a couple of really fun projects happening in the retro space right now, particularly with Tomb Raider. And so there are two major fan revivals of the PlayStation 1 classic game Tomb Raider. One of them has been ported over to natively work on an N64 cartridge, which is very cool that they're playing around with how far can I push this tech to work with these existing games. And then there are also some developers that are working on releasing a full 2D side-scrolling, what they call a D-make instead of a remake, because they're going from 3D to a 2D version. And I think that's also very fun. So I just have the greatest really praise for these developers who are using their technical know-how to reimagine these classics and then actively develop for this aged hardware. So that's very fun. Some more like fan-made projects, and this is kind of interesting, is a game called Pokemon Adventure. And it's essentially a dark, story-driven prequel that is set in the Kanto region that gives you the potential of 10 different endings depending on your choices in the game. So it's like a choose your own adventure, like taking that RPG element up to the next level. Separately, there's also some folks working on a Pokemon Snap port. This is more kind of like the Tomb Raider one, where they're trying to force it to work on a PS1. And another one is making a from-scratch D-make using Unity 5 for the 3DS. So those are fun. Here's kind of a question I have with Pokemon Adventure in particular. I've talked about ROMs and ROM hacks before, where you take the existing game and you either add something to it or change something about it to even like make your own game with it. I do wonder where the line is with something like Pokemon Adventure, which is kind of trying to make their own game using the Pokemon existing IP. I almost wonder if it would be better to use that same creativity to create your own game, to launch something brand new. I love Pokemon, and these folks are obviously a huge fan of Pokemon, but I wonder if there's a place where you say, maybe it's not time to use that existing IP and, potentially create issues for yourself with Nintendo, and instead use that time and energy and what you've learned from doing that kind of thing to make your own game. Because the truth is, we don't really need a ton more Pokemon games. What we do need is more original ideas and indie games. So I don't know. That's just kind of my thought on that. A modder is working on a physical device that is a working Pokedex. So if you've ever, I dreamed of having a working Pokedex when I was a kid. How cool would that be that I could scan, my little Pokemon toys, my Pokemon cards. I could hold it up to my Game Boy and actually find out information about them using this like Pokedex, just like in the anime show, just like Ash Ketchum did. And so this guy had the same idea. And his this modder's name is Mr. Volt. And also Big Rig Creates is another one that did this, or I guess they're working on it together. And so they made this functional 3D printed aluminum replica. Aluminum, that's high quality, of the Kanto Pokédex. And it's powered by Raspberry Pi. It uses a camera and a microphone to identify features of the Pokemon and then read their data aloud. It's probably the most complex gadget that this particular creator has ever made, and definitely fulfills that like 90s childhood fantasy for kids who were kids in the 90s anyway. Kids like me, people who used to be kids and they're still a child at heart. So another kind of not really a remake. It's Pilot Wing 64 was this game for the N64, if you remember that one, was fully decompiled. So I'm not going to pretend to understand completely what decompiling means. But generally, here's my understanding of it. They took it from machine code into human readable C code, which my understanding is that it opens up the door for native, non-emulated PC and console ports. So for a game like Pilot Wing 64, one way that you could play that would be to tell your computer, run an emulator and tell the computer, pretend to be an N64 and run this game for me. Well, this allows you to actually take that same game and say, hey, computer, here's a computer game called Pilot Wing 64. And play it that way. So I think this is really cool because it's game preservation and it allows these games to be properly rebuilt and even modernized for platforms like PC. Under the ROMs kind of news front, we talked about that place where you could go to get like access to ROM hacks. There's actually a new ROM marketplace from Afterplay, which is an emulator platform. And what they have created is a digital storefront allowing users to buy brand new indie ROMs. This is ROMs working in the best possible way. So these are indie developers who are developing games for things like the Game Boy and the Sega Genesis. And they are making them available for sale, original games. And so these range in price from like $4.99 to $9.99. It is available now. I'm very excited for indie developers. This is exactly what I was saying with the Pokemon, like ROM hack versions of games. How cool is it that these people are creating new games for this classic hardware and kind of starting to create this great ecosystem for modern retro gaming? I can't tell you how excited I am about this. As soon as I get that computer back up and running, you can bet I'm going to be looking into this to see if I can get hooked up with some original indie developed Game Boy games. That sounds like so much fun. I kid you not. There are some retro handhelds. That's another great way to play old games. I just showed you my AYN Thor. There's some really exciting handhelds. So the Thor actually just increased in price, I think by like 20%. The top one went up quite a bit, but that's not surprising with how much memory costs. So memory has, oh my goodness, the memory used in that device has probably increased by $30 at least since launch. And they haven't raised the price yet. And so now it's up, 20%, which is not insubstantial. But I think the lower tier models are staying pretty similar in price. So some retro handhelds that I am actually looking forward to this year, things to keep an eye on. The RG Rotate from Anbernic. That's the one with the little 1x1 rotating screen. And then there's one by, I don't even know how to say them. It's AYANEO, Ieneo? I don't know. Pocket Play, which is kind of a premium Android slider. Think about like slider phones. I think that one could also be really fun. It's fun to see these devices come out and allow us to play old games from our childhood and also old games that people are developing, indie developers are working on today through like the Afterplay platform. So more on that to come. I'm excited for that. With that, let's get to a very lengthy game list this week. Let's talk about the games that are coming out or that are coming out soon. Starting with Nintendo games, Nintendo officially launched a limited time Switch 2 bundle where you get a $20 discount basically when you buy the Switch 2 paired with Super Mario Galaxy 1 and 2. Both fantastic games. I think this is a great way to get both of those games and a Switch 2, especially at a little bit of a discount before those Switch 2 prices go up. I am almost certain that with the cost of everything else going up, Switch 2 prices will go up eventually. So if you're thinking about getting one, now might be the time, and this would be a fun bundle to get it with. Some new updates coming out for Animal Crossing New Horizons, which came out way back in 2020. You might remember this from COVID lockdowns. This was the game that my wife and I spent a ton of time playing together. This was like our nightly thing. We would get the kids to bed, we'd come down and sit on the couch, and we'd play Animal Crossing together. And man, good memories there. And so in honor of the series' 25th anniversary, there's a new patch that gives players a commemorative leaf ornament. It also fixes a couple of lingering bugs, some like shovel and rock issues, crafting glitches, stuff like that. Unnatural villager placements inside houses, just weird stuff that persists after, 5, almost 6 years of being out. So I'm glad this game still has some legs on it. I'm getting excited to play it on the Switch too, and definitely going to pull my wife back in to playing that with me because that is a lot of fun. It's fun to play with people. It's fun to have people to play with, right? The Legend of Zelda movie. I know we typically don't talk about movies, but how can you not talk about the Legend of Zelda movie officially wrapping filming? So there's been some discussion over whether or not Link will speak in the movie. I frankly think it would be very odd if Link did not speak for the entire movie, but maybe they'll make it work. Who knows? Anyway, that's finished filming. So that decision has been made and nothing anybody says about it was going to change that at this point. Planning a 2027 theatrical release for that movie. Some more kind of, I wasn't sure whether to put this in the Nintendo category or the retro category, but a company called Crasivo has made retro docks for the Nintendo Switch that they are releasing. I had to share this because I saw it and stopped in my tracks. And my wife happened to be standing like a couple feet behind me when I pulled this up on the computer. And she said, "You're looking to find out how much those are, aren't you?" Because they're so cool. They have Switch 2 docks that resemble a PS1, Super Nintendo, an NES. And they include like a really clever physical cartridge storage that looks like either an NES controller or a PS1 memory card. This is so cool. Now, I will say I have some hesitation about actually getting them because I don't know if they have official Nintendo support. And in the past, those types of docks have had the effect of bricking your console or making your console unusable. So that's not a risk that I'm personally willing to take. But I think they're very cool. And man, if I find out that they have full support from Nintendo for that, I will be definitely picking one of those up. It'll look fantastic on my desk. And then I can let my kids play the Switch 2 a little more easily by putting an extra dock out in the living room. So small victories that you can get to celebrate as a parent. The last game for Nintendo is Starfield. Of all the games, Starfield, a listing was spotted for Starfield on the Switch 2. And hasn't been confirmed for sure, but I think it's quite possible that it will be coming to the Switch 2 because it is powerful enough to run it. And just like with the PlayStation, I think this is a major win for this development team. The more people that get access to this game and have a chance to play it, I think this is really good. The reports indicate that the Switch 2 port is going to target 30 frames per second, so definitely on the low side. But I would rather play it at 30 frames per second and have the game actually play really well and look really well. So more to come on that one. On the PlayStation front, PlayStation Plus, the April lineup was released, and there are some good ones in here. The big one being Horizon Zero Dawn Remastered will be available for PlayStation Plus subscribers. You've got a couple of other ones on there. I'm, again, not a super PlayStation guy, so you've got games like Warriors Abyss, Squirrel with a Gun. That's a fun title. The Casting of Frank Stone, Monster Train, Wild Arms 4. All of those join the premium tier. Unfortunately, it sounds like the Starfield release for PS5 has not gone as smoothly or as well received as they had hoped that it would be. They sold an estimated 140,000 copies in the first week. But there have been a lot of issues with crashes and save file issues, which is terrifying for a game of that size. The last thing you want to do is lose your save. So it sounds like some retailers have already started to drop the price to try to get people to buy that. It is kind of raising some questions about the viability of Microsoft's multi-platform strategy, especially when compared to something like Forza Horizon 5, which sold 5.7 million on the PS5 using a similar strategy. So I don't know. This doesn't really bode well for Microsoft's strategy to make these games available to other consoles. But that also might be kind of more of a Starfield issue and not necessarily the whole plan altogether. I guess we'll find out. That remains to be seen. Lego Batman, The Legacy of the Dark Knight. I got some updates for that. It will feature one of these like old Gotham by Gaslight steampunk bat suits. If you are a fan of Lego, or you are a fan of Batman, or you are a fan of both, then you are really in luck. This game looks like a win-win for both of those brands. It's going to be pretty cool to see all of that come together into one game. I'm excited for it. That's coming out May 22nd on all platforms. EA did follow the Anthem shutdown with the closure of BioWare's Dragon Age Inquisition servers for the PS3. It's been 11 years, and they're finally shutting down the PlayStation 3 multiplayer servers. I don't know why people are as shocked as they are about this, because it is still available on PC, on PS4, and also on Xbox. So I'm not sure. Maybe it's just time for that one to go down. Also, I played that one for single player, so I'm not too sad about the online aspect of it. The next God of War game apparently is going to feature multiple mythologies. So there's some leaks talking about the next God of War game that are going to focus on Kratos' deceased wife, and will pull some elements from Chinese, Japanese, and maybe even Mayan mythologies instead of focusing on one single pantheon. I know God of War isn't one of those family-friendly titles, and it's certainly not one that I have played much of. But I think it's cool that they're reaching into different types of mythology. Anytime you can add in mythology and story into your video game, I think it really adds something to it that is cool. It's something like historical kind of that's connected, even if it's mythological. I think that's pretty neat. So under Xbox might be changing their strategy when it comes to Game Pass. Asha Sharma has admittedly it was a leaked memo, so it wasn't something she said publicly, that she thinks Game Pass has become too expensive for players. And a lot of people do agree with that maybe Microsoft would do well to reevaluate this model. So, for example, the Ultimate tier sits at $30 a month. And rumors indicate that Call of Duty 2026 might be actually pulled from the day one release entirely. So to combat costs, it sounds like Xbox might be exploring a cheaper first-party only tier, which honestly I would really celebrate, because I am a fan of Xbox for the most part because of, well, two reasons. One, for their first-party games. I think I would not necessarily be into video games today if it weren't for games like Halo and Fable and a lot of these like first-party Microsoft Xbox titles. So if they offered a first party tier, those are actually the games that I am the most excited about. That's what makes me an Xbox fan. The other thing is the achievements. That's why I play any third party game. If I have a choice between like the Switch 2 and the Xbox, I'm going to play it on the Xbox because I have my achievements there. And I primarily play Nintendo games on the Switch 2. So right now they have the essential package is $10. It's pretty limited, but it does give you multiplayer. Premium is 15. There's a PC one that's like 16.49, which is a weird price. You should just have that be 15. And Ultimate is $29.99. So honestly, Xbox is struggling with subscription fatigue, and these aggressive price hikes have not helped. So we'll see what comes out of that in the near future, but hopefully that first party only tier is something that happens. Fable, I said, I think last week that it looked like Fable was going to get pushed to 2027 because there were reports that they were delaying the Fable reboot into 2027 to avoid launching so close to GTA 6. And the official Fable social media account publicly reiterated that its release window is autumn 2026. So they are apparently, as of now, sticking with a fall release on Xbox and PC. There is kind of an industry panic over GTA 6, and it is causing people to probably rightly question their release dates. And I got some flack on social media for this one, actually. I posted this as part of a short on a couple different places, talking about how it was a good idea for them to delay, and got some comments about how it didn't really matter because Fable is a different genre from GTA 6. And that may be true. I don't know that Fable is necessarily competing for GTA 6 players. However, they are competing for the kind of market exposure that needs to happen at the release of a game. People need to know that something came out in order for them to jump in on it. So like the Fable fans are automatically jumping in on Fable. Like we've got it set to find out exactly when it's going to release because we want to play it right away. But people who might become Fable fans, especially because it's been so long since a Fable game has been released, have to find out about it somehow. And if anybody, including the media and social media and streamers, if all of that is focused around GTA 6 at the same time that Fable releases, I really think it's going to get overshadowed for people who just attention being limited. I think that can make the initial launch of a game not as successful. So I'm going to stick with what I said. I think that Fable should delay their release as much as I want it to come out sooner to 2027. I think that would be wise. Under the PC and handheld category, our final category, there was another release for Warhammer. The classic Warhammer games are getting re-released for PC. So there are over 20 of these that are getting released from the 90s and early 2000s. They are returning to Steam under the Warhammer Classics label. These are exactly the kind of games that I want to play on a PC today because it's just, there's so much nostalgia there. But the titles, which is the best part of this, have been updated for modern OS compatibility. It was a real hassle to try to get like the Roller Coaster Tycoon to play. And that was only, that was the remake of the game. And so it was only like, 10 years old at this point? Maybe a little longer than that, and it still struggled to play on a modern machine without some changes. So I welcome any of these for the standpoint of digital preservation of these, and also just making it easier to jump in and play these without having to tweak them and run them in compatibility mode. Another game coming out for PC is the Windrow's Pirate Survival game. This looks kind of fun. Formerly known as Crosswind. This is an open world pirate survival crafter, and it's basically come out in early access to a lot of success. People have really thought this was a lot of fun. Stamina buffs, base building, lots of kind of like Souls-like ground combat, parrying and dodging. You've got naval ship battles. It looks like it might actually be a lot of fun. It's in early access now on Steam, and the release date is to be announced. Another wonderfully weird game is called Dreadmore, and this game is in preview right now. It is basically a Lovecraftian horror fishing game. I can't even say that with a straight face, but it sounds kind of fun. You play like a cranky fisherman trying to escape a watery world. You have to manually fish, grapple for scrap to kind of repair your boat. You have to craft lures. You sell your catch to these like mutants, and you're trying to dodge tentacles while you're doing it. It just sounds like really a weird game that only has a place to live on PC. And I love that there's a space for that kind of inventive, goofy. It's almost giving me like Tim Burton type of vibes, but we'll see. I'm excited to look at this one a little bit more. Maybe not one for the kids, but man, it looks like a goofy one to get into. There's another thing called Indie Pass, which is a subscription service for indie games that is launching on PC. It is a dedicated subscription launcher that will have over 70 titles, offering developers a consistent revenue stream without locking them into platform exclusivity, which I absolutely love. So as long as that's actually supporting those developers, I think this is a fantastic alternative to something like Game Pass for indie developers. Pricing is looking like about $7 a month. And it is available now on PC. So if you're looking to find some new indie gems to play, this might be a really great way to do it. That pretty much brings us to the end of this week's episode. The listener question for this month is, what is your favorite game that you have played in the last year, whether it be new or old? I'm talking like the newest game that just came out or a retro oldie that you just discovered, and what made it great? Your favorite game that you played in the last year and what made it great? You can message me the answer on social media. You can find me at The Game Adventure on Instagram and Facebook, or you can email me directly at thisisthegameadventure@gmail.com. I hope you have a fantastic week, and I will be back with you next Saturday. See you then.